Think of how stupid the average person is, and realize half of them are stupider than that. What real-life example have you seen that validates this view? I'm a physician. I doctor specifically. I will tell you that the longer I work, now 15 years, my standard for the average person continues to decline. Case in point, thanks to the awful information filtering out there, I had a patient just last week who read that vitamin D helps you resist a coronavirus infection. Well, he had also read that you can get more vitamin D by getting more sun. So he wanted to collect as much light as possible with his eyes. As a result, he stared at the sun for a solid 60 seconds and burned holes directly into his retinas, permanently reducing his vision, with no chance at future improvement. A new girl started at work, and she sat across from me, so we shared some desk space in the corner. She put these flowers there with a special vase that made it look like real water in the bottom. As a nice gesture, I watered them for her before one weekend. She got a huge kick out of it, and we laughed about it all the time. I just had a customer yell at me for putting their eggs in a separate bag, saying they don't want all those bags and the paper ones always rip, before putting it in the bag and throwing a pound of flour on top. It was somewhat satisfying seeing their face as we heard the cracks, until I realized I'm the one who needed to clean it up. Oh, also she complained that we hadn't warned her about the fragility of eggs. My dad is a pesticide investigator for the state, and heard this on a complaint. I set out all these bird feeders and bird baths, but not one bird comes to my yard. I bet it is all those pesticides that Crop Duster is laying down in the field. Local school board member, as they were standing in her 5-acre yard with 20 or more cats running around. I used to manage a retail store that sold teen clothing, so as expected, I primarily had teens working for me. One employee came to the back room while I was on break and asked what I was eating. Somehow the topic turned to how I should have brought chicken for lunch because she wanted chicken. I told her I was vegetarian and therefore don't eat meat. She tells me chicken is not meat, it's poultry, and vegetarians can eat poultry. She said at the grocery store the aisles list meat and poultry separately, so they're obviously different. We argued for a couple of minutes before I finally told her to go back to the sales floor. She didn't last at the job long, but damn. Worked in retail for a few years, and it taught me that many people are either incapable or unwilling to read. I have had people walk up to me to ask me how much something is, only for the price tag to be featured prominently on the item. It's $9.99, ma'am. How did you know? It says so on the price tag, ma'am. A woman I used to work with who insisted that any animal could reproduce with any other animal. She believed that sperm from any animal was the same and that DNA was irrelevant. She believed this because she once saw some sickly, possibly deformed puppies and decided that they must have been half dog and half rat. A former coworker was talking about how she wanted to go back to school to get her master's degree because she only had a bachelorette degree and wanted more job opportunities. I said, "Do you mean a bachelor's degree?" She insisted it was pronounced bachelorette when it was given to a woman. Then she led me back to her office and pointed at her diploma to the word baccalaureate and said, "See? Bachelorette." Worked at a larger grocery chain whose deli used scales that would show you digitally the weight, so 1 and 1/2 lbs would show 1.50 pounds on the scale, etc. The person I worked, F35YRS, had to ask me to come over and tell her how much she had sliced every time she assisted someone for over 4 months. She had passed the written and verbal test they give to verify that you should be able to do this. She didn't seem to have problems reading any other signs or numbers, so I don't think dyslexia played a part, but man, it was so frustrating trying to do my job and hers. My previous employer used a 100-minute clock for the time clock. This meant if you arrived in time, your punch would read 8:50. The manager of the department assigned timekeeping to another person, because he knew he didn't understand it. After several weeks of everyone punching in at 8:50, we all got called in for it. First of all, we were all salaried, except one person, so the time didn't really matter in terms of the law. But it kept the peace, so no one complained. We all got ripped up one side and down the other, and no one was allowed to speak. Not that any of them tried, except me. When the manager and the timekeeper finally shut up, I pointed out that the clock runs on 100 minutes, not 60, so therefore we were all on time, or early. They stood dumbfounded when they looked at the clock, and it literally showed an analog clock with 100 minutes. So then I took it further to point out that as salaried employees, none of this matters, and that none of us ever left for much, giving them 9 hours instead of 8. And that they walk in at 8:30, and we are already there, so how could we really be arriving at 8:50? They understood, and removed the stipulation that salaried employees need to use the time clock. I work in IT. I once had a lady call me from home because she couldn't get connected to her VPN. I asked her if she was connected to her home wireless network. She replied saying that she did not have home wireless. I then asked how she was connecting to the internet. Her reply was, "I'm using the cell tower. I can see it from my house." While this is technically possible with a hotspot or cellular card in your PC, this isn't what she meant. She thought she could get internet service via Wi-Fi from the cell tower. When my daughter was born, we had to see the hospital pediatrician before we could switch to our usual one. We're in a tiny exam room, and he's going over the do's and don'ts for new parents. To precede this, he's an older Southern man. "And I assume she will be sleeping in a crib in the nursery? We have a bassinet set up beside the bed to make night feeding easier. She can't sleep with you. She won't be in the bed. She has a bassinet beside the bed. If she sleeps in the same room, there will be too much carbon dioxide and she'll suffocate. That's what causes SIDS." Then isn't this exam room unsafe? We put in a complaint with the practice and the hospital. That's some ridiculously incorrect information to be spouting off at people, especially parents who take everything a doctor says as gospel. I can't even find the logic in that. In the 80s, A&W attempted to compete with McDonald's Quarter Pounder burger by selling a Third Pounder for the same price. The operation failed tremendously, with virtually no one buying the burger. When they surveyed customers for an explanation, the majority of customers responded that they didn't want to pay the same price for less meat. Their customers genuinely believed that 1/3 was less than 1/4, and refused to try the new A&W burger because of it. I used to work in aircraft maintenance. There was a cage used for putting tires inside when pumping them up, to protect people if a tire burst due to the high pressures involved. Well, a story we always got told was of a trainee that was told to go pump a tire up, and was instructed, "Make sure you use the cage." Lo and behold, someone checked on him 5 minutes later, and there he was, squeezed inside the cage with the tire half inflated. There's one I have that stands out for this question. I was at my job at the time, a buffet place that has decent prices considering they serve steak on the bar, and you can get a lot of expensive product for about $17 US per adult, and had a younger couple come in during the weekend. For context, the prices at this place were a bit higher during the weekend because that was when they would pull out the bigger stuff, like prime rib. They asked for 2 dinners and 2 drinks, so I punched them into the register and tell them the price after tax, maybe $35 US or so. They look a little apprehensive at the price, and ask if they can think about it. Well, there was no one else in the line waiting to eat in, so I say, "Sure. Just let me get this gentleman's to-go order while you do." They're fine with it. So I ring in the guys to go order, and since the to-go prices were determined by weight, if you got a reasonable amount of food for a human being, getting to go was usually cheaper than dining in. So they hear that this guy pays maybe $10 US? Or something in that area, and say, Well, we'll just do a to-go order because it's cheaper. So I tell them the process for getting a to-go order in this place, and they go and start filling their containers. A while later, not exactly sure how much later off of the top of my head, they come back with like 5 or 6 fucking containers of food. All to go. I get them rung in and the price is at least $15-$20 US more than if they had just paid and eaten in, and they came back the next day to get more. They paid at least $15 US more every time they came in than they would if they had just eaten in and paid that fucking price for all the food. They really should have done some damn math.